Hello, we're going to talk about basic algebra. In algebra, we represent numbers by symbols. Quite often, we use letters. For example, if I have a number 5, instead of calling it 5, I would call it, say, A. So I'm representing this number 5 by the letter A. Why is that useful? It's useful quite often when we either need to talk about a number that we don't know, or when we need to think about some ideas that has to do with this number. So as we move along in the lessons, we'll see some examples of this. But what we want to do now is to look at how we can manipulate this number, how we can add or subtract or multiply or divide, and how we write this. So for example, let's make up another letter to represent the number 3. So now I have two symbols, A and B, and each of them represents a number. Now what would I do if I want to add these two numbers? Normally, I can just say 5 plus 3. Now in algebra, we can also use the symbols. We would say A plus B. So A plus B really means, in this case, the same thing as 5 plus 3. If we want to multiply them, we can do 5 times 3. That's multiplying 5 and 3. Or in algebra, we can write them as A times B. So that's using the symbol. Now a special way to write algebra is that we would usually leave out the times when we multiply two quantities. So if we just write AB, just AB with nothing in between, that means the same thing as A times B. But if you are adding them, then you must always write A plus B. You can't just leave out the plus. So this is especially for multiplication. If you have nothing in between the symbols, it means A times B. Now if I want to divide the numbers, I can make a fraction, 5 over 3. That's the same as 5 divided by 3. I can also use a symbol and write A over B. So A over B means A times B. So just as an example, if I need to write, say, 2 times a number that is represented by x. So in words, it would be 2 times x. Now if I want to write this as an algebra expression, I would write 2 times x. Now one point to note is that in algebra, we often use x to represent a number. The trouble with using x is that it looks quite similar to times. 2 times x and it's quite easy to confuse the times with the x. So for me personally, I prefer to write the x in a curly form, like that, instead of a cross, just to make them look different. So that's 2 times x, and as I've just said, when we have 2 symbols or 2 numbers multiplied, or 2 symbols multiplied together in algebra, we can leave out the times. Now in this case we have a number and a symbol. We can also leave out the times and write it as 2x. So 2x means the same as 2 times x. Now we have to be careful that this does not apply to numbers. For example, if I want to do 2 times 3, I cannot just leave out the times, because if I do, I'll get 2, 3, which is 23. Alright, so 2 times 3 is definitely not the same as 23. So this is just for expressions that contains symbols in algebra. Next, we are going to look at the idea of substitution. Alright, so suppose I have an expression in algebra. Let me call that 2a plus 1. So we call this an expression in algebra, or we can call it